I have found that one way to solve the leadership shortage in ministry is to clearly articulate the mission. And if the mission is truly from God, if the mission is truly compelling, if the mission is gospel-rooted and Christ-centered, then what I have found, people who don't seem to be leaders flock to that mission and in time become great leaders. Our mission in the Every Nation movement is to honor God by establishing Christ-centered, Spirit-empowered, socially responsible churches and campus ministries in every nation. I don't know if you've ever lost anything of value. My wife and I have 3 sons, and when my oldest son was about 8 years old, we were riding bicycles and visiting relatives in Georgia, and he took what he thought was a shortcut to race me back where we started, and he got lost. We got back, and I had misplaced my son. Boy, that was a terrifying thought, not misplacing my son so much, but telling my wife I couldn't find him. We eventually found him, but we misplaced him. And you know, Jesus' parents misplaced him one time. The story is told in Luke chapter 2. Jesus was around 12 years old, and they were going up to the feast of Passover in Jerusalem. And in verse 42 it says, when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. Verse 43, and when the feast was ended, they were returning, and the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it. Verse 44, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey, but then they began to search for him among the relatives and acquaintances. And this is amazing to me, that Jesus' parents lost him while doing religion. We do religion, we do worship, we do mission, we do church, we do campus ministry, we do all kinds of things. And like Jesus' parents who thought Jesus was with them, they assumed his presence, but he wasn't there. And I think sometimes we can assume that because we had Jesus' presence before, we had his favor before, it just goes on. But as ministry grows, somehow and someday we wake up and realize, man, I used to be a spiritual director, now I'm a program director. And programs need to be directed, don't get me wrong, but ultimately and starting point, we're spiritual directors, we're spiritual leaders who have to also be organizational leaders. But sometimes we can lose the center, we can lose Jesus, we can lose the point. We're talking now about Christ-centered and what that means. And sometimes we lose that center. There are a lot of wrong centers in ministry. Sometimes a church can become preacher-centered or personality-centered or experience-centered, worship-centered or worship style-centered. The list goes on and on. All of those things are important, but they can't be the center. What we're trying to do is Christ-centered. We're trying to do mission and ministry and campus and evangelism and church and whatever we're doing where Christ is in the center. We don't just assume, but we deliberately and intentionally put Christ in the center of everything we're doing. Revelation 5:6 says, this is John's revelation and picture of heaven in the end. He says, I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne. Now think about this. John's vision of heaven, of eternity, Christ, the Lamb, the slain Lamb is in the center, not on the side, not a side issue, not an add-on. The slain Lamb is the center. When John is having this vision of heaven, we find right in the center, time and time again, is the slain Lamb, is the Lamb, Jesus, right in the center. Whatever we're doing in every nation, our campus ministries, our outreach to the underprivileged, our church planting, our church ministries, our leadership development, whatever we're doing, we are intentionally and determined to be Christ-centered. There's not a leader in the center, Christ-centered.